Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Crashy, and today we are going to be talking about griefing and the rules and what should be allowed in competitive Fortnite. Now, there are a couple of examples that have kind of sparked this discussion in my mind and things that I want to cover and just give my opinion on, as always, here on the channel. And it's coming from the FNCS finals, or even just some of the heats. Yesterday we had a situation with Innocence, and then earlier this morning we had a situation in OCE with the X2 twins, in the actual finals of the FNCS trios event. Now, the main debate here is what is allowed in terms of making dumb decisions in game in order to grief other players, or it's really such a weird situation to even define, and I think you have to just kind of do your best to understand the situation in its entirety, so that way you can kind of create a well-measured opinion and then kind of go from there. So first and foremost, I want to talk about the Innocence and his trio situation. Essentially, there was a team, and I'm not going to go and do a bunch of additional research because it's not actually that important to me who was on the opposing trio. I know the main player in question from the clip that I saw was Kryza, and basically in this clip, Kryza and his trio are pushing well out of the zone. I mean, like going well out of their way to push out of the zone and to fight Innocence and his trio. And essentially what happens is, that is griefing. I mean, it's by every term of the word in terms of our definition as players and our understanding as players on what griefing is. They are using their game to ruin, or very much so hinder, the possibility and the opportunity of another trio's game. And here's the thing, I just don't know that there should be anything against this. I mean, griefing in other games is sometimes a punishable thing, but in Fortnite, it's more so the understanding of how your game gets griefed and what the residual effect of being griefed is that makes it griefing. It's not just like you're totally ruining the game for your teammates' experience. It's nothing like that. So I don't personally feel like there's anything we can do in terms of punishment for griefing. And I've been thinking on this for a while now. I mean, because even back for whenever people first originally started saying, oh, I get griefed all the time, I kind of wondered what that meant. Was it more of like a like a poor understanding of they lost a fight and now they feel like they've been griefed, or is it literally like, hey, another team can truly make a decision that just ruins our chances? And even if you come out with a win, that is technically the case. I mean, it's very much so the case, and I think a lot of people understand that if another team forces a really poor fight on you or forces a really tough situation on you, even if you win the fight, you may come out in a very unfavorable situation. So yeah, sure, you'll get your 3 points or whatever, but it doesn't really set up a trajectory to get a win, and that is ultimately how you get more points. You can make it further into the game, you find a win, you do whatever you have to do to score more and more points throughout the course of the series. Now, the reason this becomes an issue is because there are players in the FNCS example, 6 games to be played. There are trios that are at the very bottom of the leaderboard, and mathematically, it's impossible for them to make it. So the question becomes, what incentive do they have to try? And like what is stopping them from griefing a game? Because if you think about it, I don't want to call it strategy, because there's not much in terms of netting the team that's behind any kind of a redeeming quality. There's nothing that redeems them, so I don't know that you could call it a strategy to grief a top team, but you definitely could, just because you would want to, I suppose. And so think about it. 6 game, and I'm just creating a scenario. Let's say you're the the bottom 1 or 2 trios. You pretty much have 0 chance. I mean, you have a 0% chance of winning the event or even qualifying for finals. If we're talking about the heats, you have a 0% chance of doing any better than you're already doing right now, because you're already on your very last game. What is your incentive to not only try to make it to end game and score as many points as possible, but to specifically not go out of your way and grief an enemy team? Now, say you want to be a team that wants to shake things up just for the sake of doing it, which I can't possibly see how this would be outside of the rules to do so. I really just can't. you could just hot drop on the number 1, number 2, number 3 team in an attempt to grief their game, you know, make a fight in the early game last very long, use every resource you have available to you, potentially take them out, because you're good players at this point in the game. You know, at this stage in the FNCS, you're an amazing player, just because you can, because you have no potential to get yourself any higher, and you know, because there's no really rules against it. So the questions are interesting. It comes down to what should be allowed, how do you enforce it, is it even enforceable, and ultimately, is there a way to change the incentive in order to keep players trying their best, or add a rule to say that they have to try their best. But then again, how do you enforce that? So without going too far into the discussion, which I already have gone quite a bit, I do want to talk about the X2 twins in Oceania for the finals of the FNCS. Now, essentially, they got a Discord message from another trio, another player, whatever, it doesn't matter to me. And the player essentially said, hey, we'll stop dropping at your landing spot if you follow us on Twitter. Now, this, to me, I feel like it's bad sportsmanship. I feel like it's, I don't know, maybe unethical, but again, the same thing remains. There's not really anything you can do about it. There's no way to enforce a drop spot or a decision-making, you know, in game. There's just no way to tell them, like, hey, you can't leverage your drop for a follow. And if anything, the conversation that happens out of game is almost entirely irrelevant, because it doesn't really matter why they choose to drop there. If they qualified for the event, they can drop wherever they want. And I'm briefly going to go ahead and touch on a topic that I might cover in the future. I think having one drop spot at the highest level of competitive is really it's archaic, and it's not something that I expect to continue for too long in Fortnite. I don't know, maybe it will. Maybe this is not something that other people are ready to accept, but I personally think you should have 2 to 3 drop spots and be very, very good at 2 of them at least. But we'll talk about that in another time. So, you know, what can be done? How can Kryza's team be punished or banned or reprimanded, and how can the team that's contesting the X2 twins be banned or reprimanded for choosing to make a decision in game? And from my perspective, speaking, you know, purely outside of the game, I mean, obviously I understand the frustrations are high, and these situations, even from my perspective, are not good. I don't appreciate players using their position to try to hurt other players' potential opportunity, and I think it definitely comes down to incentive. Now, Infamous, if you guys know him in the community, he has essentially said that, and I agree with him, that the incentives for doing better in terms of, even if you're on the lower side, they're not great. The prize distribution is still just kind of like a participation trophy. You know, if you make it there, you're gonna make some money, and you know, ultimately, I think if you're at the very bottom, the money that's rewarded in these finals and these events should incrementally get higher the higher you go. So that way, you know, those point differences do matter. You shouldn't be trying to, you know, be at the very bottom griefing games when there's potential money to be made by getting to the middle of the pack or something like that. So ultimately, I think that could be a good way to help get players in line. But again, I think the core of the discussion for me has been, you know, is there a way to enforce non-griefing, and you know, what could be done, what do you do, and ultimately, in my mind, when I really think about it, and again, I'm trying to pull myself out of the player perspective and just look at the event maybe as like a tournament organizer, or you know, someone that would be trying to logistically answer these questions and think about these issues, my mind just goes to the same place. I just don't think there's anything you can do, because the players are going to do what they want, and you can't tell them they can't go somewhere. There's no pick and ban phase for drop spots, although I have thought about a concept like that, and I thought about presenting that here on the channel. Like, maybe there are specific drop spots detailed out on the map, and there was a pick and ban phase and a, like, you know, seeding for it, and ultimately it just gets way too muddy, and that would probably never work. So I'm never going to go down that route with you guys, but it's definitely something to think about in terms of, you know, the discussion we have here. How do you control players, what they do, where they choose to go, and ultimately, is there any kind of punishment, reprimanding, or is it just simply an issue with distribution of prize money, and, you know, the understanding that players should be trying to do their best because ultimately it has a payoff And you know, there's a negative to being the very bottom team on the leaderboard. You know, you get less money. That makes sense to me. So ultimately, I'm just curious. I'm kind of fishing for your guys' opinions. I like Infamous's position. I think the idea that, you know, players are just getting participation money is, you know, it's great. Yeah, if you make it that far, you deserve money. I definitely agree, but it should have a significant drop off the lower you go, so that way these players are consistently 6 games, 10 games, whatever it is, consistently pushing themselves as absolutely far as they can, so that way they can earn a little bit more money, maybe earn a little bit more respect. I don't know what else is in place. But as always, I open up the discussion to you guys. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section down below. What can be done about griefing? And you know, it's such an aggressive term, and in Fortnite, I mean, I'm not saying that you can't be griefed. You absolutely can have your whole game pretty wrecked. I mean, you can have amazing loot, and really just your only goal is you have to make it the end game. You know, you'll be able to pop off. You know, you'll have the mobility, the guns, the shields, and one team can hold you, and it's tough, and you have to be able to beat them. And even if you beat them, that doesn't guarantee that you now have a good trajectory to make it to end game and to potentially win. So again, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What do you think about griefing in Fortnite? You know, from the position of, you know, a tournament organizer that has to find ways to alleviate this issue, all the way down to, like, should this be punishable? What do you guys think? Let me know. Please do not leave without leaving a like. I appreciate you for checking out this video. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next video.
Do you feel your bones start to shake? Do you feel the